On August 4th, 1822, James Madison said the following: "A popular government, without popular information or a means of acquiring it, is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy." Madison understood something fundamental about American democracy. It depends on an informed population. Not just people who vote, not just people who have opinions, but people who really understand how the government works, what both sides are trying to say. Today, political polarization in the United States is rising, but what's less discussed is how political polarization is reshaping education itself. And if education continues to be pulled into partisan conflict, polarization won't just continue, it will accelerate. Let's begin with a troubling reality. More than 70% of Americans fail a basic civic literacy quiz. Less than half can name all three branches of government, let alone how many justices are on the Supreme Court. That means millions of voters don't fully understand the structure of the system they participate in. At the same time, political scientists have found that Americans increasingly view members of the opposing party as not just wrong, but immoral or even dangerous. This shift is called effective polarization. It's not about policy disagreement, it's about emotional hostility. So we have two trends happening at once. We have declining civic knowledge, and we have increasing political hostility. And those two trends feed each other. When people lack basic civic understanding, they rely on more simplified narratives. Those narratives are often partisan, and partisan narratives rarely encourage nuance. Instead of asking, how does this branch of government function, the question becomes, which side is winning? Which side wants the best for America? Which side wants the worst for America? Who is going to destroy America? That's not how it should be. As we move to formal education, what students are actually taught in schools, under the 10th Amendment, education standards are largely controlled by individual states. That means curriculum decisions are shaped by state legislatures and political leadership. As polarization rises, education has become a target. One example is the backlash to the 1619 Project. This project aimed to reframe American history by centering the consequences of slavery and focusing on the contributions of black Americans in early history of our country. In response, multiple states passed legislation restricting how its ideas could be taught in schools. For example, Texas House Bill 3979 included clauses preventing teachers from presenting certain interpretations of American history, mainly just the 1619 Project. This wasn't just disagreement over curriculum, this was law being used to define what is acceptable, what political ideology is acceptable to be taught, which in certain states, which leads to a whole disagreement between different states, not helping the cause. It doesn't create national university. It creates parallel civic reality. Moving on to the book bans. The politics in 2023 to 2024, over 10,000 books were banned in the United States. A sharp rise compared to previous years. Many of the books removed from schools contain themes involving race, LGBTQ identities, women's perspectives, or social justice movements. Research also shows a disproportionate number of banned authors are also women, LGBTQ+, or people of color. Book banning isn't just about removing content. That seems to just be almost an excuse. Sure, there's some books that say that, but there's also a lot of books grouped in that don't necessarily have those such things. When students are shielded from complex or controversial ideas, they lose opportunities to critically evaluate them. And civic education isn't about comfort, it's about understanding. In a democracy, citizens must encounter perspectives they disagree with, not avoid them. Back in 2023, Florida banned the new AP class, AP African American Studies. State officials argued the course lacked educational value and conflicted with state law. This came after the passage of legislation restricting how race-related concepts could be taught. The controversy wasn't just about one course, it symbolized something larger. When advanced academic material becomes subject to political approval, education shifts from inquiry to compliance. It shifts from learning all different perspectives and learning what history of our country to what do the state's politicians want their kids to know because it supports their legislation? Maybe. If curriculum is shaped primarily by partisan policies, students may receive an education filtered through political ideology rather than historical complexity. Over time, this leads to uncivic foundations across the country. For example, Massachusetts is a blue state. They have not passed any of these bans or anything like that. Well, a state like Texas has done it. And kids from Texas and kids from Massachusetts now have different views of American history, and they both lean into their state's political ideology. It's different. It's not unity that we had. It's new, and it creates more political polarization. It's not good. Some students grow up with broad exposure to competing ideas. Others grow up with restricted academic frameworks. And when those students enter the same national political system as adults, political polarization deepens because they are not operating from the same informational base. Formal education is only part of the equation, though. The other half is informal education. Media, news, and especially social media. About 73% of Americans use social media and mainly rely on it for news. These platforms are designed to maximize engagement. Algorithms show users content that matches their past behavior. If someone interacts mostly with conservative political content, their feed then becomes mostly conservative. If someone interacts all with cats, for example, if they love cats and they like a bunch of cat videos, their feed will become full of just cats. That's what the social media companies use to keep you hooked. If you've ever found yourself doom scrolling on Instagram, that's why. Psychology also plays a role here too. For example, you have negativity bias, which causes people to react more strongly to alarming or hostile information. Confirmation bias leads people to favoring information that supports their existing beliefs. And social media algorithms showing exactly what they like and not showing what they don't like doesn't nearly help these two factors. Together, this causes echo chambers. And when civic knowledge is already weak, people are more vulnerable to these echo chambers, distorting their political views. So here's my warning. When civic education declines, citizens become more susceptible to misinformation. When misinformation spreads, polarization intensifies. When polarization intensifies, education becomes even more politicized, and the cycle repeats. This isn't just about disagreement between Democrats and Republicans. It's about whether Americans share a common understanding of how their government works. James Madison warned that democracy without informed citizens could be a tragedy. If education continues to fragment along partisan lines, both in classrooms and online, polarization will not plateau, it will escalate. Not because the disagreement exists, but because the shared foundation of civic knowledge is eroding. And without civic understanding, democratic cooperation becomes nearly impossible. This is not a political issue, it's an educational one. People don't know the same stuff just based on state lines. They have different opinions based on what they've learned because of state lines.